Hi, I'm Beth. This yoga class today is going to be all hips, no hands. There'll be some options for adding in your arms, but no weight on the hands throughout this entire practice. What is all going to be on the floor. We're going to use a blanket. So you'll start from a blanket in a basic rectangular fold, and then we're going to create a little blanket burrito where you fold it about a third and then another third. So the idea is that you have a relatively thick little blanket roll. You can use blocks. It's nice to have the softer blanket. If you have a pillow, just make sure it's not too squishy. And then we're going to start with the blanket toward the bottom third of the mat. And we're going to start with our pelvis supported on the blanket. So however that's easiest for you to get there, let's get there. Just lift your pelvis up onto the blanket and then you'll lie back. If you want to start lying and put your blanket there, that's good too. Okay, so you can readjust your blanket as needed. It should be right under your sacrum, which is that bony triangle at the bottom of your spine. And then find your feet somewhere under your knees and widen them a little bit, maybe even as wide as mat width apart. Remember, no hands, your arms can relax by your sides. And we're going to start with some baby windshield wipers. So windshield wipers with the knees. We're not bringing the knees all the way to the side. And this little bit of elevated position, just giving the knees a little swish back and forth, taking the attention to our hips. So notice, you can see in the leg that's moving away from you, I'm internally rotating that leg at the hip, externally the other one. And then when I bring my windshield wiper back toward you, it's the opposite. And take your attention to this movement. That's part of our mindful yoga practice, is attending to our movements. You might notice if there's any restrictions, any places that feel tighter, places that feel looser and more easeful. We're going to try to move our hips around in all directions in the hip socket and do a little bit of strengthening work in addition to the stretching. Okay, maybe just a few more to each side. We're only moving within a comfortable range, so we're not going to strong sensation or pain. We're never going to pain, but even now we're not letting our sensation be intense. We're letting it be really chill. All right, back to center. You might find the need to readjust the little blanket burrito so it stays under your hips. Bring your feet in a little bit more toward your bottom and a little bit more hip width. Doesn't have to be any kind of exact, but so that your feet can support under your knees. And then from here, we're going to do a baby bridge, lifting our hips, but you're already a little lifted because of the blanket, so we're only going to float the hips a little bit off the blanket. So get ready, and you can have your arms in these little robot arms, or my teacher called these oven mitt arms, so you can press your upper arms into the ground and don't need to use your hands. T-Rex arms also. Okay, take a breath in, and on the exhale, push into your feet, gently engage your back body, your hamstrings, your glutes, to float the hips a little bit off the ground. And as you float the hips, notice my hips are barely leaving the blanket. It's almost like my clothing is still touching the blanket. Go to the place where you just start to feel a little bit of a stretch sensation across the front of your hips. Those are your hip flexor muscles. And then release back down. So we'll do a few like that. Lifting just to the point where you engage. You can use your arms to help with this lift. We're really using the lower body so that we can feel that stretch in the opposite area. And come back down. And anytime you need to readjust your body or readjust your blanket, you do that. Let's do one more. Holding in that low place, we're not pushing way up into a big arch. And let's see if you can give your hips a little bit of a wiggle. Move them around in this place. Maybe moving the sensation of stretch and strength to different areas. Okay, and then you can settle back down. We're going to stay on the floor, but we'll move the blanket under our feet instead. So if you left enough room above you, you might just be able to do a little wiggle. I think I didn't leave quite enough room. I moved the blanket a little bit toward my feet. And then come back down on the floor, feet on the blanket. Now notice how this feels. It might feel different than what you're used to. If your blanket is really soft and slippery, you might want to flip over the edge of your yoga mat. I'll show you that. Let's just take the edge of our yoga mat right over. Yeah, that gives us a little bit more of a firm contact for our feet. Okay, that's good. And then from here, we're going to take a figure 4 movement with our legs. So we cross one ankle over the other. Let the knee open out of the bent leg. And again, we'll do baby windshield wipers. So moving now just in the one leg in the hip joint, back and forth a little bit. And bring your attention to whether this feels any different. Do you notice internal or external rotation more than you did when we were doing both legs? And if you want, as you do this, you can let your top leg get into it by moving your knee, which is really moving the hip joint. So the knee changes direction or moves around, but the movement comes from the hip joint of the leg that's on top. You might feel like you're almost circling that knee the other direction. So notice these movements aren't precise, they're not exact, they're exploratory. Then come back into stillness. Once again, make sure your foot is firmly on the prop. We can take our arms back to our T-Rex arms. We're going to push into the single leg for our little baby one leg bridge. So let's push up, a little bit of lift. Now you have to strengthen the glutes, which of course are connected to the hips, the hamstrings, and again, a little stretch in the front part of the hips. We're only going to do this one time, the one-legged version, but let's hold a little longer. Make sure you breathe. One more breath in this position, a little bit of nice strength kicking in. And then sit down and we'll switch legs. So you can keep your T-Rex arms or you can place the arms down by your side, whichever you prefer. Start those baby bridge. We're not going for a twist here. That's a really nice twist. If you'd like to do a figure 4 twist, try it at the end. Right now we're just exploring range of motion in the hips. So for the leg that's on the bottom, when my legs come toward you, it's internal rotation or adduction, and when it goes out, it's external or abduction. A few more times, and if you want to add the top leg moving around as you do this, do a little exploratory movement in both legs. Maybe it starts to look a little more freeform. Okay, and then come to center, make sure that foot is firmly placed. And we'll take a little baby one leg bridge lift, engaging the back body to stretch the front. Pressing the bottom foot firmly and engaging all the muscles, the glutes, the hamstrings, to allow some stretch to come into the front. Double duty, both strengthening and stretching at the same time. All right, one more breath. And then you can set that down. And let's roll to the side to come up. Or you can rock and roll up or get there however you want. Let the part of your mat come down. We are still going to use the blanket. And you can keep the blanket toward the bottom third of your mat if that's where it started off for you. Bring both of your knees onto the blanket. And then we're going to lunge forward with one leg. I would suggest to start with the leg that's furthest away from me. So you can see this is my left leg. Back toes can be either tucked or flat. You can just test and see which is better for your balance. This will feel a little unbalanced, and just like we did with our hips on the floor, you might want to adjust a little bit to feel but this is at a comfortable place supporting your knee. So the knee of the bottom leg is pretty much under the hip. The leg of the forward leg about at a 90-degree angle. And you can let that leg open up a little bit. So a little bit wider stance, and maybe that will help you feel a little firmer here. The first thing we're going to do is pelvic tucks. So tuck your pelvis back, like you're sending your tailbone back, your front spills forward, and then tuck it under, like you're rounding the low back. And do that a few times to feel that sense of movement. It might feel more constricted, it might feel looser, it might feel something else. We're trying to let it be free, comfortable movement. And you're going to stop somewhere in the middle, but maybe a little bit more toward the scoop. We don't want an actual scoop, but you want to feel like the femur of the front leg is really plugged in and that this leg is moving forward. Sometimes it tends to move back and out that way. We're going to do that, but not yet. So let both sides of the hip face forward. Maybe a tiny little scoop. And then either with or without the hands, take your hand that's the same as the back leg, dangle it by your side. Your front arm hand can just stay here, or if you'd like, this is the optional arms I was talking about, you can reach up and over to the side. Now, if this feels unbalanced, you can set up a little closer to the wall and have a wall here. That's completely fine. It's still no weight on hands that way, and you can even put your forearm on the wall. So notice where you're feeling a stretch, and you maybe lean a little forward, a little back to explore that stretch. And let your arm lower as you come more upright. Here you might want to have your feet a little bit more back toward hip width apart. We're going to take a twist, moving from the belly button up through the rib cage area. I'm going to be twisting away from you. So take a breath in. On the exhale, you can even put your hands, if you're using your hands, around the rib cage area. Feel that twist happen. And wherever your body naturally stops you, that's where you stop in the twist. I'm not all the way outside. I'm kind of out into a diagonal facing my plant over there. And you can let your hands sort of hold you in place if that works. Going for a pretty gentle twisting movement here. And then we'll start to unwind, open that twist, and to open toward you. And the back leg might even kick a little bit on a diagonal or off the mat behind you so that you're able to open up a little bit. So this front leg or this bent knee does externally rotate a bit. And from here, we're going to take another little lateral bend. This time we're going in the direction of our front bent leg. You can let the arms hang as we did before, or you can actually slide the front arm on the inside of the leg. And I'm not going to take my back arm up. I'm going to leave it resting down. So a little bit of a different direction, hopefully, for where you might feel this version of the twist. Or a lateral bend this time, but there's a little bit of twisting action because I twisted toward you. Mostly we're moving laterally, which is to the side. All right, last breath here. And then we're going to push up and come up and do the other side. So I think I'll stay here, even though that means I'll be turning away from you. Then you can see it from the back a little bit. So take the leg nearer to me, forward. And remember, you can open it out a little bit. You can have the back toes tucked, or they can be flat. I'll try it flat on this side. See how that feels? It feels a little more wobbly. That just encourages my balance reflexes to kick in. All right, we'll do that pelvic rock. So scooping and tipping. Feels a little different on this side to me. Maybe that's true for you too. And then we set up in a place that, if anything, is a tiny bit more scoop, but really what we're thinking about is pressing this front part of the hip forward as we plug this side of the hip into this side of the femur, this leg, this whole leg bone, into the hip and pelvic girdle. And from here, I'm going to let my arm near you with my front leg dangle, reach the other arm up, and start leaning toward that side. So you're leaning toward the side of the front bent leg. And as you lean, you can lean a little back or a little forward, keeping your legs in the same orientation, but maybe exploring where taking your torso in a slightly different direction perhaps enhances your stretch a little bit. If you'd like to rest your arm on the leg for balance, do that. All right, one more breath here. And then come up. Take your legs so that they're a little bit more hip width. If it feels better wide, of course, you can keep it that way. Prepare for your twist by breathing into your torso, and then exhale, spinning around the rib cage area. So I'm really upright. I'm not leaning forward or leaning back. I'm really upright as I take this little twist. And I'm also really not trying to go for my maximal twist. I'm really trying to get some upper body, thoracic spine. This is this whole rib cage, chest area movement there. One more breath. All right, let's revolve around the other way. Here's where I won't be facing you anymore. And my foot kicks a little toward you. I adjusted a bit to feel more balanced. So I'm facing the back wall. My hip girdle is open. And start to slide my arm down in a lateral stretch, just letting my other arm dangle. Remember to breathe even as we hold positions for a little bit of time. Last breath. And spin back around. Okay, last little bit. I'm going to sit down for a moment. We'll have both knees on the blanket still, just for some support and also to give us a bit of elevation. Your feet can come a little closer together like mine are, a little triangle shape with the legs. Now I'm going to put my hands, resting them in front of my thighs on my hip flexors, just as a reminder to push this part of my body forward into the hands. I'm going to start to lean back a little bit. So as I lean back, I don't want to fold. I don't want to arch. I want to keep my front body pretty flat and start to lean. So surprisingly, just like we did before, we're really encouraging a stretch in one area while the other area is working. Even though we're going the other way, our back body has to work to support us in space here, work against gravity, and our front body all the way down into the front quads, because our hip flexors are part of the quad muscles. It's getting a bit of stretch. Last little bit here. And come up. I didn't say no hands was going to be no work, but minimal work. So last little bit of this practice is we'll take our little blanket roll and turn it the other way so that you can sit right on it. And I do recommend sitting up on it, even if you don't usually sit on a roll when you do seated poses, just to explore what happens when you put your body into a different direction in space. So get comfortable in Sukhasana, that's easy seat. Some loose version of Sukhasana where, yes, one calf is bent in front of the other, but not like a super tight version. Let it be a little loosey-goosey here. Shift around so that you can ensure that your sits bones are supported by the blanket, that you are sitting upright. You can start with whatever shin you want in front, because we are going to switch. So take a little bit of a turn toward the toe of the front leg. So that diagonal, for me, that's toward my left, but as you're looking at me, it'll look like right. So if you're mirroring me, you're right. And then from this diagonal, then right from the front hip crease, we're going to start to fold forward. Now you can fold forward any amount. The goal is to transfer the stretch to maybe the back waist, glutes, outer hip, somewhere in that area. If you want to gently use your hands for support, you can. The other way to do this, no hands, is to have a table or a chair here that you can rest your upper body on. And that's where this, if you held it for a while, it becomes more of a yin-like pose where you could stay 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, We're not going to do that, but you can get the idea of, oh, I'm starting to feel a stretch, and if I let that sensation just be at a minimal level, I can stay there a really long time. We'll just take a few more breaths here. After your next exhale, lift yourself back up, turn back toward the front, and switch the cross of your legs. So same thing in that we're letting this be a nice loose cross. We're not making ourselves get into this tiny tight shape, and sometimes looser shapes can really allow us to relax into the stretch a little bit more. Wiggle around so you find a good position on this side. You might notice less external rotation in your leg on this side. It's normal from one leg to the other to be different. Breathe in, and as you exhale, a little bit of twist toward your front toes, toward that diagonal. And when you find that place, a hinge of your torso, only to the point where you start to feel that stretch move somewhere in the opposite side. I like this stretch because I actually feel it up in my QL, my lateral back area, and that's a tight area for me. And remember, you don't need to use hands at all. You can keep this pretty upright. You can rest on a chair, a table, a tall stack of pillows, or if weight on your hands or light weight on your hands, just support is okay, you can put them down to the floor. No need to really rest your body weight on them. In fact, it's gravity here that is helping you get that stretch. All right, last few breaths. Remember, we'll rise up first and then turn back around to front. Last move, we're going to take our feet into a cobbler's pose or butterfly shape. We're not using our hands, so don't use your hands to grab and yank your feet in close. Put your feet wherever you can without your hands, even if that means a wider diamond-like shape than you might usually get. Completely fine. We want this to be really relaxed, and you might find with being a little bit more upright than you're used to, your knees can spread out a little bit more. If you like that sensation, feel free to take your feet more forward and let them hang. Mine go to about here today, and that's good. And then lightly rest your elbows on the inner thighs, encouraging that release without pushing, without forcing anything in your body. If you'd like, you could take your thumbs to the last two fingers of each hand in prana mudra. That's a mudra for energy. You may choose to close your eyes for a moment or two. Explore what benefits this practice brought to you today. How it feels to allow yourself to move in a way that maybe you don't use a part of your body you're really used to relying on or depending on. Now, if you want to do more no hands practices, I have a whole series of standing only, call them lunchtime practices. You can try those up here. If you want to try some more yin work where we do the longer holds, I have a yin playlist as well. Please let me know what you think of these videos. Your comments really help me to determine what to do next. And go ahead and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of what I have to offer. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Have a great rest of your day.